Beth was beyond furious with me, her husband, Mark Johnson. How did I know? It was pretty obvious. As we drove home from a party hosted by some friends of hers, Lisa and Joe Parker, she sat as far from me as possible, her arms crossed, wearing a look that could turn water into vinegar. Why was she so angry? Well, I suppose she had every reason to be upset, considering I completely ruined her night. Quite a blunder, huh? I should feel guilty for embarrassing her, the mother of our 3 kids. Shame on me. But how exactly did I mess up the night? I grabbed the wrong key, that's how. See, there's a rather strange twist to the parties the Parkers host. One that my dear wife apparently decided to embrace without a second thought. Unfortunately for her, I wasn't on board with the idea. We'd never attended one of their get-togethers before, but somehow after 10 years of marriage, Beth conveniently forgot to mention that this particular party had an unusual ending. All the wives were expected to toss their house keys into a bowl. Then each husband would randomly pick one and spend the night with the woman whose key they drew, indulging in an evening of illicit pleasure. As the night came to a close, and I realized the true nature of the party, I nearly lost my mind. I'd never been so mad at Beth. Grabbing her by the arm, I pulled her into the kitchen. "Did you know how this party was supposed to end?" I demanded. She smirked, not an ounce of regret on her face. "Yes, I knew." "And you didn't think to tell me?" I asked, still fuming. "No, because I knew you wouldn't agree if I did," she responded, cool as ever. "You're absolutely right. I don't agree, and I still have a choice. Let's go home." "We can't leave now. It would be rude. You'd put me in an awkward position," she argued. "Besides, it's just one night. It could bring some excitement into our marriage." "I can do without this kind of excitement," I shot back. "Let's just apologize and leave." "We need some excitement, Mark. I need it. Just one night, and I'll feel desired again, not just like a wife and mother." I shook my head in disbelief. "I'm not interested in this, and I won't let this happen." Ignoring her protests, I dragged her back into the living room, where everyone was gathered around the infamous bowl, ready to pick their partner for the night. Beth tried to pull away, but I didn't let go. When I finally reached the bowl, I made it clear to everyone. I wasn't informed about tonight's arrangement, and I won't be sharing my wife with anyone. I dug through the bowl and pulled out our house key, which I recognized by its blue keychain. Holding it up for all to see, I added, "My marriage is sacred, and I don't condone this." There were a few grumbles from the crowd, but I didn't care. I turned to Beth, who was livid, her face flushed with embarrassment. I gave her an ultimatum. "Beth, it's your choice, but decide now. Come with me and leave this nonsense behind, or stay and never come home." "I'm leaving." The entire room fell silent as all eyes turned to my wife. After a tense pause, she spoke, her voice tight with frustration. "I'm sorry for my husband's behavior," she said to the group. "I'd love to stay, but I suppose it's best if I leave." Begrudgingly, she followed me to the car. "You're insufferable," she hissed as we got in. "How could you embarrass me like that in front of everyone? We'll never be invited to one of their parties again." "Embarrass you? What about how you embarrassed me by not telling me you planned to sleep with another man tonight? Well, you could have picked another woman, and we both would have enjoyed ourselves." "I don't want another woman, Beth. I've always been faithful to you, and I'm disgusted to learn that after 10 years of marriage, you want to sleep with someone else. It would only be once, Mark. Just one night, out of all the nights we've shared. That's not much to ask, is it?" "It's a lot to ask. This isn't some small thing, Beth." "It's a big deal," I said, pulling over abruptly. "But if this means so much to you, then fine." I made a sharp U-turn and sped back toward the Parkers' house. Beth let out a yelp as I turned the car around. "What are you doing, Mark? If sleeping with another man is that important to you, then go ahead. I won't stop you," I said as I pulled up to the house, tires screeching. "There's still time for you to enjoy your adventure." Her face went pale. "What are you saying?" I'm saying you can go ahead and join them, Beth. Go find someone else to give you what I apparently can't. It's just an adventure, Mark. Something different. You're perfect, but I need this. Well, I don't want any part of it. I've been faithful to you, and I'm not about to change that now. If you go through with this, it's over between us. Beth hesitated, her hand on the door handle. Can you pick me up in the morning? She asked, a note of hope in her voice. No, I'm sure whoever you end up with will be happy to take you wherever you need to go. Her expression soured. You make it sound so dirty, Mark. It's not like that. It's exactly like that, Beth. You're about to spend the night with a stranger. She sighed. It's just one night. It's not a big deal. Even 1 second would be too much, I said firmly. If you go through with this, we're done. She didn't seem to understand. You're overreacting, Mark. I'll be yours again in the morning, and you'll forget all about this. No, Beth. If you walk back into that house, I'll never want you again. She opened the door. See you in the morning, Mark, she said with a defiant smile. No, you won't, I whispered as I drove away, leaving her standing in the driveway, stunned. I hoped she'd call, admit she was wrong, and ask me to come back, but she never did. As I drove, tears filled my eyes. Beth had chosen a stranger over me, over our marriage. I remembered my father's words. If a woman is seriously considering sleeping with another man, she's already crossed the line. And it hit me. My marriage was over. The real tragedy in all of this is our 3 children. 9-year-old Natalie, 8-year-old Emma, and 4-year-old Mark Jr. How can I go on without seeing them every day? But I can't just overlook what Beth did without consequences. The kids were spending the weekend at my mom's house, which gave me time to figure out my next steps. I drove around aimlessly for about half an hour, still hoping Beth would call and ask me to pick her up. But as the minutes ticked by, it became painfully clear that she had made her decision. Finally, I headed home. As I pulled into the driveway, my phone rang. For a moment, my heart raced, hoping it was her, but the caller ID told me otherwise. I answered anyway, and on the other end was Ted Mason, one of the guys from the party. Hey, Mark, it's Ted. Beth gave me your number. She's really hoping you'll come back. She said she's excited for tonight and thinks you should join in. You're a lucky guy, you know. Ted continued. Every man here is hoping to pick her key. She's been telling everyone that tonight's going to be unforgettable, and she wants you to be part of it. It's getting pretty heated here, Mark. They're ready to show you a great time. Screw you, Ted Mason, I spat. And to hell with everyone at that party, including my unfaithful wife. I hope you all get what's coming to you. I hung up and staggered into the house, my mind spinning. Within 20 minutes, I had packed 2 suitcases, enough clothes for a week or 2, grabbed my laptop and shaving kit. I loaded everything into the car. After rummaging through some drawers, I found our marriage certificate. With grim satisfaction, I tore it into 4 pieces. Then I grabbed a hammer and flattened my wedding ring. It took several hits, but when I was done, I placed the ring and the torn certificate on Beth's pillow. Locking the front door behind me, I drove off into the night. I intended to find a motel a few miles outside town, but before that, I circled past the Parker's place one more time. A few cars had already left, and I saw some people standing in pairs, chatting on the street. Beth wasn't anywhere in sight. I figured she had moved on with her new partner, or perhaps paired up with Joe Parker himself. The motel I eventually found was in a nearby town. It wasn't fancy, but it had a secluded parking lot in the back, which suited me just fine. I locked the car, picked up a 6-pack of Newcastle from the convenience store next door. I went back to my room to unwind with some TV. The first 2 beers helped take the edge off. But as I popped open the third, my phone rang. It was Beth. I knew she wasn't calling for me to pick her up, so I let it go to voicemail. Mark, you're acting like a child, her message began. Ted told me what you said. How many times do I need to tell you? It's just one night. I'll let one guy have me for a few hours, and it doesn't make me immoral. Sure, it might sting a bit, but I'll make it up to you in ways you can't imagine when I get home tomorrow. You probably don't care, but since you pulled our key from the bowl, they gave me another one. The guy who got it is named Brian. He seems nice, and he promised he wouldn't pressure me. He's married with kids too. Since you're at our place, I went to him. His wife and her boyfriend are staying in a different room, so we won't disturb them when things get heated. You know how vocal I get when you touch me. She let out a soft laugh. Mark, I know you're upset, but I promise I won't let him do anything we haven't done. I told Brian we should keep it simple, maybe stick to the usual positions. He's been with me a few times, mostly missionary, but we might mix it up a little. He agreed, especially since it's my first time with another man. He'll drive me home tomorrow, and I'll shower and freshen up before I come back to you. No leftovers for you, baby. Sweet dreams. Love. Get ready for some excitement when I see you in the morning. Love you, Mark. Listening to her message tore me apart. How could I have married someone so foolish and immoral? Sure, Beth had always been a bit scatterbrained, but I thought it was part of her charm. Now her recklessness was going to cost her everything, her life, her husband, and probably her kids. She didn't understand that I couldn't just forgive her after she let another man have her and flaunted it in my face. I should have ignored her message, but I couldn't help myself. I dialed her number, and she picked it up after the third ring. Hey babe, she cooed. Brian and I just got into bed, so I can't talk long. Shut up, Beth, I said coldly. This is the last time you'll hear from me. You have no idea what you've done, but you're about to find out. Enjoy your night with Brian, because when you wake up tomorrow, our marriage is over. Got it? You're finished. Her voice faltered. Mark, what are you saying? Don't be like that. I never thought I'd say this, but I hate you more than I ever loved you. Expect to hear from my lawyer next week. And with that, I hung up. 30 seconds later, the phone rang again. It was her. I let it go to voicemail. Mark, she began, her voice cracking. Why are you doing this? How can you say those things to me? I'm your wife. Can't you just let me have this one night? Brian and I are just getting started, and now you're ruining everything. I don't even know if I can enjoy being with him now. We're not getting divorced. I'll be home tomorrow, and we can talk this out. I come home now, but I promised Brian I'd be with him tonight. Please, try to understand. He got my key, and I told him he could have me. I can't go back on that now. She paused, and I heard her speaking softly, presumably to him. Oh God, yes, Brian's ready. I have to go. I love you, Mark. I'll always love you. See you in the morning. I felt sick to my stomach. I couldn't resist. I called her back, but this time, the phone rang several times before going to voicemail. Clearly, Brian had already claimed her. I left her a final message. Beth, it's clear you're with him now. You're enjoying everything he's giving you, all the new sensations. You've broken my heart, and I'll never forgive you for it. You've kept your promise to Brian, but you couldn't keep your vows to me. You're nothing more than an adulterer now. From here on out, you can be with as many men as you like, but you've lost me forever. Beth never called back. I knew why. Once she was involved with a man, she became consumed. Nothing else mattered. I wasn't sure if she even listened to my last message. Either way, it didn't matter. Our marriage was over. I downed the rest of the six-pack, trying not to think about Beth lying in bed with Brian. I didn't want to imagine her doing all the things she used to do with me, but I knew she would. She was always vocal during sex, and tonight would be no different. The beer finally took its toll, and I passed out, tears still rolling down my face. I woke up a few hours later, the harsh reality hitting me again. My wife had betrayed me, and I had to figure out a way to protect my kids, get rid of her, and make everyone at that party pay. We lived in Norwood, Mississippi, a picturesque little town along the Gulf Coast. Luckily, Mississippi recognized adultery as grounds for divorce. That might help me avoid paying child support. It could also help me gain custody of the kids. I needed a good lawyer, a really good one. I showered, got dressed, and called my mom around 7:30 to let her know what was happening. She was just as shocked as I was about Beth's actions. She promised not to say anything to the kids for now. I told her I'd pick them up once I had everything sorted out. Even though it hurt to admit it, I knew Beth would probably get custody of them, at least temporarily. She'd always been a good mother, but after last night, I couldn't think of her the same way. After hanging up with my mom, I headed to a nearby diner for breakfast. Just as I was about to park, my phone rang again. It was Beth. I ignored it, but she called again. When I didn't answer, she left a voicemail. Through sobs, she said, "Mark, please answer the phone. What do you mean you might never see me again? What's this about divorce papers? You can't leave me, Mark. I won't let you. Our kids need both of us. How could you tear up our marriage certificate and throw away your wedding ring? You vowed to wear it forever. I didn't think you'd take it this far. I love you so much, Mark. I just needed that special night with Brian, and it was amazing. He made me feel alive again. I've forgotten what it was like to laugh and scream at the same time. But as incredible as it was, you're my man. You're the only one I want. I can fix this. Please come home and let me show you how much I love you." Her voice cracked again, and she broke into more sobs. "Why can't you understand, Mark? I just needed one night with someone new, someone who desired me, who wanted me. It felt so good to know another man found me irresistible. You don't know how much that means to a woman my age. But it was just sex, Mark. That's all it was, just a few times. I'll never do it again. Please, let's talk. You and the kids mean everything to me." I stood outside the diner, stunned. Had she harbored these thoughts throughout our entire marriage, only to suddenly act on them after a decade together? Beth was still a beautiful woman, shoulder-length dark brown hair, piercing blue eyes, and a figure that turned heads. Her hips had widened a bit after 3 kids, but she still attracted attention wherever we went. What was all this talk about needing to feel desired by another man? I had always shown her how much I loved and desired her. I often surprised her with flowers and took her out on weekly date nights. But apparently, none of that mattered. She had wanted something new, something thrilling, and in doing so, she had destroyed everything we had built together. I couldn't forgive her for that. I went inside the diner, ordered some coffee, and sat there, staring out the window as the reality of the situation continued to sink in. Beth's betrayal wasn't just physical, it was emotional. She had torn apart our family, our trust, and the life we had built together. And for what? A night of feeling desired by a man she barely knew. It was incomprehensible to me. I knew what I had to do next. I would hire the best divorce attorney I could find, one who would fight for me to get custody of the kids and ensure that Beth's actions had consequences. Mississippi law was on my side when it came to infidelity. I would use every tool available to make sure she didn't walk away from this unscathed. After finishing my coffee, I stepped outside, took a deep breath, and dialed the number of a lawyer I had heard about, a tough, no-nonsense attorney who specialized in divorce cases. It was time to take the next step. Beth was still a striking woman, with shoulder-length dark brown hair, light blue eyes, and a stunning figure. Her chest wasn't overly large, but not small either. Yes, her hips had widened a bit after having 3 kids, but she still managed to attract attention from men wherever she went. So, what was this sudden talk about needing to feel desired by another man? I'd consistently shown her how much I loved and desired her. I regularly surprised her with flowers, and we went out on weekly date nights. We weren't a couple that had drifted apart, at least not from where I stood. I always thought we had a good marriage, a strong connection. I even bought her alluring lingerie and affirmed her beauty and my love for her daily. Until last night, I believed our sex life was fulfilling. We made love at least 3 times a week, and she always reached multiple climaxes. What could I have possibly overlooked? Despite losing my appetite, I entered the diner, found an empty table, and ordered scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. I barely touched my meal, but went through at least 6 cups of coffee. I had never felt so adrift, so hollow, so utterly defeated. I'd heard people talk about wishing for death, and now I understood why. The only thing keeping me from sinking into total despair was the thought of my children. I had to keep going for them, to navigate the mess Beth had created and carve out a future for us. That realization gave me strength. I had to persevere. I just needed a plan. Beth called me nonstop that day, but I sent every call to voicemail. She pleaded for understanding, but not once did she apologize. There was no admission of guilt, just an insistence that she needed that one night. And my job was to support her. According to her, they had only had sex 3 times that night, and once in the morning. That's it, she said, as if that somehow made it easier to forgive. She also mentioned she might not have turned off her phone in time, and was worried I'd overheard her with Brian. She hoped I hadn't heard too much. I had to give her credit. She knew exactly how to twist the knife. I couldn't comprehend how someone could be so foolish. The only silver lining in this mess was that I now had enough audio evidence of her infidelity to use against her in court. I didn't know if it would be enough, but it was certainly damning. Tomorrow, I will start putting things in motion. I'd look for a good lawyer and gather all the information I needed. I visited my kids at my mom's house. She mentioned that Beth had already called to check on the kids and asked where I was. Mom told her I was devastated and didn't want to speak to her. Beth apparently broke down in tears, saying she didn't understand. My mother reassured her that no man would accept his wife flaunting a night with another man in his face. Beth then asked if she should pick up the children, but Mom advised her to let them stay a few more days until things settled. The kids were thrilled to see me and asked where their mom was. I told them she was busy with a special project and that they'd be staying with Grandma a bit longer. We played games, had dinner together, and I kissed them goodnight before heading back to the motel. Tomorrow was going to be a long day. Before calling it a night, I drove past my house one last time. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized what I had lost, something I could never get back. It struck me as odd that I didn't see any unfamiliar cars in the driveway. Maybe the car was in the garage. Only a single light glowed from the kitchen window, suggesting Beth was alone tonight. I found myself caring despite everything. The betrayal stung, but a part of me still worried. Against my better judgment, I parked a block away and approached the house from the side, where I could peek through the kitchen window. There she was, sitting at the table with a nearly empty bottle of Grey Goose by her side. Her hair was a mess, mascara streaked down her cheeks, and she was wrapped in a robe, her head resting on the table, eyes closed. It was clear she had been crying, surrounded by a pile of used tissues. For a brief moment, I felt a pang of sympathy, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of what she had done. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I resisted the urge to knock on the door and instead returned to my car, driving away with a small sense of satisfaction. Perhaps she was finally beginning to realize the magnitude of her actions. If she needed comfort, she could go to Brian. Monday morning arrived, and I had a busy day ahead. I returned to the diner for breakfast, and this time managed to eat my eggs, toast, and coffee. After finishing, I called my mom to speak with each of the kids, reassuring them that I'd be home soon. Then I contacted my office, letting my assistant know that I'd be dealing with personal matters for the next 2 days. She asked if everything was all right, and I told her I'd explain later. During my last year at Ole Miss, I'd roomed with 2 close friends, Doug Lewis and Liam McRae. We kept in touch over the years, though we didn't see each other often. While I pursued a degree in computer science, Doug studied business administration, and Lee went into law. I decided to reach out to them for advice. I called Doug first, asking if he and Lee could meet me for drinks later that evening. I explained that I needed their counsel on something important, and Doug agreed to set it up at a beachside bar around 5. I arrived early and waited. Lee showed up first, followed by Doug 10 minutes later. After greeting each other, we settled at a table on the patio, ordered beers, and raised our glasses for a toast. "So, what's on your mind, Mark?" Doug asked. Your call sounded serious. I took a deep breath. Beth cheated on me and didn't even try to hide it. I confessed, laying out the entire story. That's rough, Doug sympathized, shaking his head. I can't believe she'd do that. Lee chimed in. And without remorse, you said. She's acting like you're overreacting. Exactly, I replied. She thinks it's no big deal. So I'm thinking about divorce, getting back at Brian, and most importantly, getting custody of my kids. Lee leaned back in his chair, rubbing his chin. Divorce is certainly on the table, but it won't be easy to get custody unless you can prove she's unfit as a mother. If she's bringing men around the kids, then you've got something to work with. Otherwise, if she's a good mom, the courts will lean in her favor. You'll likely end up paying child support. I'm okay with that, as long as I can see my kids often, I said. Lee nodded. The courts generally prefer both parents to stay involved, as long as neither of you is a danger to the kids. What about the finances? Doug interjected. Beth's a stay-at-home mom, and I'm guessing you make a solid income. How are your savings and investments looking? I've got checking, savings, a 401, an IRA, and a few other investments. Probably around $700,000 to $800,000 total, I answered. Well, the court will likely split that evenly. Beth will probably get the house and custody of the kids, but if you can prove her infidelity, you might avoid paying alimony. Do you know a good divorce lawyer? I asked. One of the partners at my firm is one of the best family law attorneys in Mississippi. Her name's Sandra Simmons. Want me to set up a meeting? The sooner, the better, I agreed. I'll also look into ways to protect some of your assets, Doug added. Send me all your financial details, and I'll get on it. We toasted once more, had a few more drinks, and then called it a night. For the first time in days, I felt a glimmer of relief. There was still a long road ahead, but at least I had a plan now. On the way back to the motel, my phone rang again. It was Beth. After a moment of hesitation, I realized I'd have to face her sooner or later, so I pulled over and answered. What do you want, Beth? I asked, cutting straight to the point. What do you think I want, Mark? I want my husband to come home, she said, her voice trembling with emotion. Unfortunately, your little escapade with Brian makes that impossible, I replied coldly. Don't say that, Mark, please. Don't you dare say that. It was just one night after 10 years. That's not grounds for divorce. Infidelity is most certainly grounds for divorce in Mississippi, I shot back. Why do you keep calling it cheating? It was just one night with someone new, just a fling. When a married woman has sex with another man, whether it's for one night or 1 second, it's cheating, I said firmly. I told you that if you went through with this, it would be over between us. And I meant it. Her sobs echoed through the phone. Please, Mark, you can't do this to me. You did this to yourself, Beth, I said. What the hell happened to you? Are you on some kind of drugs, or did you just have a complete mental breakdown? You didn't care about me, our kids, or what this would do to our family. You just had to have your night with Brian. And now you're going to face the consequences. I never wanted it to be like this, Mark. I didn't think I was hurting you. I just wanted to try something new. I love you. It wasn't about you. It was about what I needed. That's what brought us here, Beth, I replied bitterly. You put yourself first. You didn't think about me or our kids. You just thought about what you wanted. A special night just for yourself. I said, the bitterness in my voice unmistakable. Well, congratulations, Your Highness, you got your wish. and it ended your marriage. It probably also ruined your reputation with your family and friends. Maybe one day I'll forgive you, but I'll never forget. And I'll make sure everyone knows what you did, just like you mocked me for being upset about your affair. Let's see how you handle it when everyone hears your confession, how many times you were with Brian. Oh God. Mark, please. My parents would be devastated if they found out, Beth cried. Too bad, Beth. You should have thought of that before you made your bed. Now you've got to lie in it. You act like this was no bigger deal than getting a parking ticket or forgetting to return a library book. You threw away a solid 10-year marriage with a man who adored you for a night of cheap thrills with a stranger who only cared about his own pleasure. Does it feel good, Beth? That Brian slept with you 4 times, and it cost you your family. I asked sharply. I didn't have to lose anything, Mark, she shot back. You should have loved me enough to support me and let me do it. Are you out of your mind? There isn't a single sane man on this planet who would support his wife having an affair just because she wanted to try something new. It doesn't work that way, Beth, and you should have known that. What were you thinking when you did this? I demanded. I didn't expect you to be this upset, she admitted. I mean, seriously, Mark, what's the big deal about letting another man have me for a night? It doesn't mean I love you any less. I've heard about couples hooking up at the Parkers' parties, and it intrigued me. Why can't a husband or wife have a fling with someone nice and safe, enjoy the experience, and explore new sensations? I stared at the phone in disbelief as she continued. I just wanted to experience another man's touch. It didn't mean I loved you any less, Mark. It just meant I needed something different, just once. Then I would have committed myself to you again, and never done it again. But that meant you didn't respect me, I said, my anger boiling over. I begged you not to do it, over and over again, and you just smiled and said, "See you in the morning, Mark." You took away what we had shared for over 10 years. The vows that meant everything to me clearly meant nothing to you. We created 3 beautiful children out of the love we had. We were a family. And now you've willingly given that part of yourself that made our children to another man. For what? A good time. A one-night stand. It was just one night, she repeated. And you need to accept that and move on. I shook my head, frustrated beyond words. I say it was nothing less than a complete betrayal of me, our family, our sacred vows, and any respect you ever had for me. You wanted to be with another man, and you did it. Congratulations, Beth. But in doing so, you threw away everything you supposedly valued. She was silent for a moment before blurting out, "Damn it, Mark. Why are you being so stubborn? Why can't you understand that it was just something I needed? I'm yours forever. Nothing has changed." "Everything's changed," I said bitterly. "You're not just mine anymore. I don't understand why you can't see that. I pleaded with you not to do this, and now you expect me to forgive and forget. You betrayed me willingly, and this pain will last a lifetime." I took a deep breath and continued. "I found a lawyer. Tomorrow I'm filing for divorce, citing infidelity. I'll name Brian, and I'll name anyone else from your party I can identify. Imagine their reactions when they find out you're responsible for breaking up their little circle and ruining their reputations. Go to hell, Beth, and take your cheating friends with you." The moment I met with Sandra Simmons, ESQ, I knew I had the right attorney. She didn't waste time with small talk and got straight to business. She asked me why I wanted a divorce and what I hoped to achieve. I told her I wanted to split our assets, offering Beth the house in exchange for less cash. I knew I likely wouldn't get full custody of the kids, but I wanted unrestricted visitation rights without having to pay child support. I also gave her all the audio evidence I had of Beth confessing to sleeping with Brian. Sandra shook her head in disbelief. "Your wife was careless, admitting to her affair in a way that could be used against her in court. We may need a voice recognition expert to confirm it's her voice, but unless we end up with an extremely biased judge, "This recording should hold up in court," she said. We spent the next hour discussing my plans regarding Brian and the other participants from the wife-swapping event. Sandra doubted we could get any monetary compensation from them, but she suggested we could expose their activities and shame them enough to cause serious damage to their reputations. I agreed that would be enough for me. After giving her a deposit, I asked that Beth be served as soon as possible. Sandra assured me it wouldn't take long and promised to let me know before it happened. On Tuesday afternoon, I picked up the kids from my mom and took them to Beth's house. When she greeted us at the door, she hugged and kissed the kids warmly. But when she reached out to me, I stepped back. Tears welled up in her eyes as she pleaded with me to stay, but I told her I couldn't. I thought it was best for the kids to return home to her. I arranged to pick them up on Friday for the weekend. Beth looked like she was struggling, and part of me sympathized with her. But she had made her choice. Her distress was no worse than what I was going through because of her actions. On Wednesday, I went back to work, realizing I couldn't afford to neglect my job. I needed the income, but even more so, I needed the distraction. If I allowed myself to drown in the pain of Beth's betrayal, I'd lose my mind. I couldn't do that, not with my kids depending on me. That Thursday, I met Doug and Lee for dinner at the Oyster House. We talked over shucked oysters and dirty martinis, and I updated them on the kids and the divorce. Doug was still looking for ways to protect some of my assets, and I gave him the green light to proceed. It wouldn't be much, but it would help in the long run. We came up with a simple plan to disrupt the wife-swapping club without risking any slander lawsuits. Lee had a friend who worked as a reporter for the Biloxi Sun-Herald. He was confident that if I provided him with the address of the Parker house and the approximate time the group met, he could expose them. He planned to write an editorial about the wife-swapping scene, hinting at the involvement of local businesses without naming names. This would stir up enough trouble among the city's religious crowd to cause real problems for the group. I gave Lee what little information I had, and he said he'd take it from there. We shook hands and parted ways, and for the first time in a long while, I felt a sense of relief. The weekend with my kids was wonderful. We went shopping, caught a movie at the Grand 18, and spent a day at the beach, swimming and playing frisbee. My children were my #1 priority now, and I swore I would never abandon them. On Monday, Lee called with good news. His reporter friend was already working on the story and had taken photos of couples entering the Parkers' house. Though the faces would be blurred, people in a town like ours wouldn't take long to figure out who they were. Lee said it could hit the front page by the end of the week. Beth continued to call me, pleading for me to come home and promising she'd do anything to make me forget her actions, but she never apologized. Not once did she admit she was wrong. By Wednesday, my lawyer informed me that Beth would be served with divorce papers on Friday. Doug also called with more good news. He'd managed to move about a third of my money into accounts under my children's names, protecting it from any future claims. That same day, Lee told me that his friend had staked out the Parker house and was ready to get more photos at the next wife-swapping event, scheduled for Friday night. He also wanted to interview me for the article. I agreed, feeling a sense of closure starting to take shape. On Friday, my lawyer called around 2:30 to confirm that Beth had been served. I knew what was coming next, and sure enough, my phone rang within minutes. "Hi, Beth," I said calmly, knowing exactly what she wanted to talk about. "What did you do, Mark?" she demanded angrily. "I filed for divorce, as I said I would," I replied, keeping my voice level. "And I told you, there will be no divorce. Spending one night with another man isn't cheating, Mark," she cried, her voice cracking. "I have to disagree," I said firmly. "Having sex with someone other than your spouse is infidelity, Beth. That's how the law sees it, and that's how I see it." Her tears were almost palpable through the phone. "Why are you so angry with me, Mark? I love you. Brian and I had an affair. That's all. An affair isn't all, Beth. You had sex with another man. You betrayed me, and now you'll face the consequences. Goodbye, Beth." I hope you have a nice life." With that, I ended the call. The hardest part of all of this was that, despite everything, part of me still loved her. I knew that feeling might never go away, but the trust was shattered beyond repair, and that meant our marriage was over. Even though I knew I should stay away from the Parkers' house that Friday night, I couldn't resist the temptation. I wanted to see if Beth's car would be there. To my relief, it wasn't, but she could have arrived with someone else. While couples were usually required to attend together, I knew they had made an exception for her before, and who's to say they wouldn't again? I parked a block away, noticing a van that was likely housing the reporter. I silently wished him luck as I drove off into the night. Later, Lee's journalist friend called for more details, which I was happy to provide. He mentioned he had captured over 100 photographs and had already recognized several prominent couples in the city. He said that some people didn't even bother hiding their identities. After confirming that Beth wasn't among the attendees, he asked me to describe the key-swapping process. While I hadn't seen it firsthand, I relayed Beth's account and what I'd overheard from other couples. By Sunday, the article hit the front page of the Asterisk by Loxie's Sun-Herald Asterisk, sparking outrage across the city. The paper featured a large photo of couples entering and exiting the house, their faces blurred but easily recognizable by their clothes or cars. Inside, there were 4 more pages of photos and a detailed write-up. The city was buzzing by Monday morning, with local radio and TV stations discussing the scandal. For me, it was a bittersweet victory. The religious community had erupted in protest, civic leaders condemned the city's tarnished reputation, and lawsuits were flying left and right. But all I could think about was the pain I had endured because of Beth's betrayal. Beth continued to try to reconcile, but her attempts were futile. Our divorce was finalized, granting me joint custody of the kids. She had them on weekends, and I had them during the week. It wasn't ideal, but it worked. In the end, I spared her the humiliation of sharing the audio of her confession with her family and friends. As for the couples involved in the key parties, some divorced and moved away, while others simply vanished from the social scene. Beth started dating again, but it was clear she still didn't understand why what she had done was so unacceptable. I dated a few women, but never found anyone I was ready to settle down with. Some wanted to move in, but I wasn't ready to hand over a key. Thanks to everyone who took the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed it, please consider liking and subscribing if you haven't already. Feel free to share your thoughts on the events in the comments below. Take care.